The United States is facing a growing epidemic as the number of children who are introduced to the foster care system continues to grow. Ironically, most Americans are unfamiliar with the foster care system, minus what they hear in mainstream media. However, before I go any further, I would ask that you close your eyes and listen to the personal account of a child that was introduced to the foster care system. He states, "I did not really know what a foster home was, and no one cared or took the time to explain it. I just knew that I didn't want to go to one. The only thing that the worker said was that I would never live with my mom again. This was so horrifying that I became sick and vomited. The thought of never seeing my mom again devastated me. I was empty inside, dazed, and in a fog." Now I would ask that you put yourself in the place of that child. The only sense of normalcy that you know is your family. And then there's a family situation where an outsider gets to come in and make a decision about whether or not you remain with your family or if you're removed. And no one asks you your personal opinion. No one takes into consideration how you may feel about it. The decision is made with no consideration as far as your personal feelings towards that decision. Now, what I want to do over the course of the next few minutes is to provide some background information on the foster care system, as well as to examine the potential causes for increase and then look at some of the problems associated with foster care. Now, in cases of abuse or neglect, a child can be removed from their home by a child welfare agency and placed in foster care. Now, the term foster care itself refers to all out-of-home placements of a child that can no longer remain with their family. Now, that includes children who are placed with relatives, children who are placed with non-relative foster families, or some form of congregate care, either an institution or a group home. What's staggering is almost half of the children in foster care live with non-relative families. Now, a family can be introduced to the foster care system due to a report of suspected maltreatment. A claim can be filed by any citizen who remains anonymous, and the burden of proof is on the person who's accused, not on that person who's doing the accusation. Now, likewise, there's some mandatory or mandated reporters. Those include social workers, teachers, and other school officials, physicians and other healthcare workers, mental health professionals, child care workers, medical examiners or coroners, and also law enforcement officers. Now, ironically, some of the people charged as mandated reporters have a difficult time distinguishing between the effects of poverty and what's actually neglect. Child welfare agencies have noted that mandated reporters may confuse cultural differences with neglect. Now, based on those findings alone, there's a potential for an increase in child placement. Now, data also shows that 500,000 children currently reside in foster care nationally. Data reveals that foster care placements have also increased over the last 10 years. So you might ask yourself, why don't more Americans know about this growing epidemic? Well, I don't know. I do know that in the mid-1980s, there were some significant social issues that had a huge impact on child welfare system. There was homelessness, the growing incarceration rate, the crack epidemic, and the exposure to HIV and AIDS, which devastated poor families. Now, this was especially true within the African American community. And as a result, that's what shows within the child welfare system. There's a term that's used called racial disproportionality. So what is it? What is racial disproportionality, and why is it that racial disproportionality exists in the child welfare system? Well, data that was gathered in 2008 by the U.S. Census Bureau document an overrepresentation of certain ethnic groups, mainly African Americans and Native Americans. Now, the answer to why disproportionality exists within the child welfare system may be linked to social prejudice, but studies reveal that African American families are more likely to be reported. Now, this may be due to socioeconomic issues versus race, but more interestingly, research supports not only are minority families reported for maltreatment, their cases are more likely substantiated during investigation. So, just as the aforementioned social issues spread within the poor communities, eventually they will spread to the middle-class America. So, what are some of the identifiable problems with child welfare? Well, now, when a child enters the system, they're not being exposed to a single system for services. See, foster care is a process involving multiple systems that interact for the common good of the child. Now, the key stakeholders include state and local welfare agencies, family courts, public agencies that administer government programs such as public assistance and behavioral health counseling, and then you have private sector providers such as Medicaid. Now, families often struggle with requirements paperwork from various interconnected agencies. What may qualify them for one service in one agency may disqualify them for services in another. But the key catalyst to this whole process is the caseworker. Now, ironically, caseworkers are normally middle-class white women who are tasked to investigate various claims of maltreatment. However, their customers are often poor, minorities. Cultural awareness training is a huge challenge that impacts caseworkers, as they're charged to develop culturally appropriate services in support of the family. Now, data suggests that caseworkers who investigate and assess maltreatment may have a bias on the cultural divide. So here we have the caseworker who's the decision maker. They lobby for the removal of the child from their homes, and they're also the investigator for the maltreatment claim. Now, add to their job the role of locating and providing services to address any perceived family need. But what happens if they're not properly trained? Now, from the outside looking in, a family could easily see the caseworker as a policing agent serving as a ground level judge and jury. See, one can also not ignore the fact that caseworker caseloads continue to increase. See, in 2001, nearly 3 million referrals were made to Child Protective Services. And of that number, 900,000 children were identified as victims of maltreatment. Those figures alone are staggering. See, so caseloads vary from 10 to more than 100 cases per worker, which is dependent upon the agency. So it's safe to assume that the more heavy the caseload, the less amount of time and attention the caseworker can give to a specific case. What I want to say is having an understanding of these problems associated with child welfare system can only heighten public awareness of this growing epidemic. Now, over the course of my speech, I provided some background information on the child welfare system while examining the potential causes of the increased child placement and looking at some of the problems associated with the foster care system as a whole. And based on the information provided today, one should be more aware of this growing epidemic as the number of children introduced to the child welfare system continues to grow. Thank you.